Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. And we're not taking calls today. Rich has a lot to talk about, and so do I. From Montana, live, Rich Scheben. Welcome, Rich.
Well, thank you, Vincent. Did you catch up on your farm work yesterday, by the way?
Oh, hey, yeah, I wanted to say thank you so much. I wanted to thank you for two things. One, for helping me when I needed some time for the farm, and two, for mentioning cars. And so since you...
Yeah, I'm so shocked how I do that at the beginning of every show, every time I'm on the air with you. It's just, it's amazing.
Well, the amazing thing is, I don't even hear it sometimes. Sometimes I don't hear you even mention cars, but I know you have. But now, since you've mentioned, and class, that term, since you've mentioned cars, is the title of the unfinished, unpublished, not available for sale book that I'm writing. It's called Since You've Mentioned Cars. And that's with Rich Scheben. That's where that originated, right here on that broadcast. So, but since you mentioned cars, Rich, negative interest rates. We talked privately off the air a few days ago about negative interest rates. And they've been, popping up here and there, but gosh, it looks like it's taking off. And class, let me just give you a thumbnail, a very short thumbnail of what I'm talking about. When I lived in Virginia, I knew the bank president, and there were 5 branches of this particular county-wide bank. And so it was a very small bank, and just branches in the county. They were not outside the county. And I happened to meet the bank president years and years ago, and because we had a business, we got a chance to see each other every once in a while. And whenever we had some extra funds lying around, I'd call him up, and his name was Bobby, not Robert, Bobby. And I'd call Bobby up, and I'd say, "Hey, Bobby, what can you do on a certificate of deposit? What's your best rate?" And he'd say, "Well, in the lobby it says," and he'd give me some number, and I go, "Yeah, I know what it says in the lobby, but I'm just wondering what you can do for me." And I would always get a better rate. And one day he said, "Hey, Vinny, when I called him and asked him that same question, because I'd ask him, pretty often every, few months. One day he said, "Vinny, we're not going to charge you to hold your money." And, that was so foreign to me. Now, that was 30 years ago, 30 years ago. Now it's not foreign. He knew this was coming. He just didn't tell me. Hey, y'all better get ready, because pretty soon, in 30 years or so, we're going to charge you to hold on to your money. And that's exactly what's happening in Europe with pension funds. Pensioners are being charged to hold their money in a bank. So you start out with, let's say, $1,000. After a year, you might have 900 and something. Let's say 980. That's what's happening right now. Rich, would you like to comment on that? How serious this is? This is foreign to everybody.
Yeah, and I know I've given talks on this years ago on negative interest rates and the overall effect of the economy when you look at and Vince, I'm going to need some time to put everything in perspective and context, because I want to dovetail ideas and solutions with that in case there's some power that be that isn't greedy. that believes in economic output and productivity and not crony capitalism. But, we've talked about this in a lot of detail regarding welfare for the rich. We've talked about, fractional reserve lending, stock buybacks, printing money out of thin air, where the money goes from the bottom 93% in the form of wealth redistribution to the elite at the top 1%, under the guise of liquidity and solvency issues. So banks and Wall Street and all the too big to fails and too big to jails and the zombie companies, we've talked about all of this. They're getting all the bailouts because it's a lot less left-right paradigm, a lot more aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs. Now, there's so much data, and what Vince is talking about, folks, is an article that I'm sure most of this audience has read about banks. This particular bank was in Ireland imposing negative rates on cash-held pensions. Well, Europe's had negative rates for a long time, and we've even had negative rates for a long time when you incorporate the definition of real interest rates. See, we've talked a lot about Hegelian dialectic, just a lot of how they reinterpret and redefine terms and definitions. Now, you've heard me talk about earnings and markets and fundamentals, liquidity, solvency, inflation, deflation, fair value, leverage, evaluations of price to earnings, price to sales, GDP, credit, debt, core business, corporations, money printing, free market, supply and demand, velocity of money, profits. All these terms are now ambiguous because there's so much corruption and manipulation and a creative accounting behind the scenes. Now, this particular article talked about how they're going to do this against the wealthy, for the phony benevolence, phony. I mean, there's so much phoniness going on, phony philanthropy, phony nobility, phony equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, diplomacy, economics, and like Dr. Shilley and I talked about yesterday, phony medicine and the institutions supposedly controlling that. Everything is phony, and while using divide and conquer strategies to keep us off balance. So they're saying, well, only the people who have $1 million or £1 million or whatever unit of measure in the wealthy are going to be affected. Well, let me tell you, these super wealthy, they have so many loopholes that they don't even pay. If they pay taxes, it's such a small percentage of their net worth compared to what we pay, because all the loopholes and all the scams are in their favor. Now, when we talk about negative interest rates, we also talk about it's also in the context of bail-ins. So the bank depositors are in that context paying the fees. So right now we have a lot of loans, postponing mortgages and rent payments under the term of forbearance. I'm sure you've heard this. Basically creating a greater probability of negative rates or banks or lenders, and they all get their money from taxpayers and savers by forced confiscations. But negative interest rates are really an admission to the forced confiscations. And right now we have over 70% of government debt issued in the past year is going to mature in the next 11 to 12 months. So that's also an indication that we're heading towards possible negative interest rates. Now, years ago, I gave quite a few presentations about this. But now we have more delinquencies, more defaults, more bankruptcies, and more creative accounting and theft from the elite towards the little people. Now, when I talked about if we go to negative interest rates, I'm being repetitive for a purpose. We got to remember that banks, that's a word, whether it be investment or commercial, they should be called casinos, okay? A bank, the only difference between the state of Nevada and banks is the fact that you don't have a pretty girl serving you drinks to get you drunk while you're in the lobby. That's it. Okay, because the House always wins. Banks have been borrowing from the U.S. Treasury. Now it's the U.S. Treasury / Fed because of their so-called voluntary merger, if you will. So they're borrowing at basically zero. It's like you getting a product. Let's say you're a manufacturer and you're selling widgets. You get that widget for free, or all the parts to put it together for free, and then you get to write off your labor for whatever reason. Maybe you get a grant from the government, which happens a lot. And then you sell those widgets for a profit. Well, the spread is not only amazing for you, which banks get, but they have no risk now. They're totally protected. You've heard me use the term victim group status and protectionist group status. Banks get full rights and protection under the protectionist group status definition. So what we need to do is several things. So that's why I use that disclaimer. If we go to negative interest rates and if we do these things I'm about to mention, because I try to give benefits and representation to the little people, the bottom 93% of income earners, who does not get any. Because, I mean, when you look at what's happening behind the scenes, a lot of it's not even hidden anymore. The Fed's buying even, they're buying bonds, exchange-traded funds, ETFs. That's not even supposed to be legal. It's supposed to, you have to have a guaranteed issuance by the government, like Ginnie Mae's and U.S. Treasuries and things like that. So the Fed is trying to own everything, which is, I think, a very dangerous situation. But yet at the same time, because of all this printing of money and giving away to the too big to fails and too big to jails, they're also becoming insolvent. So I don't know what direction are we going in. Are we going to sound money like silver and gold? It all makes sense from a common sense perspective, logical perspective. But with crony capitalism and corruption in our government and corporations, common sense and logic doesn't usually prevail. It's usually corruption and manipulation, and what the big guys say prevail, so they can feed their own power, money, control, addictions. Now, when you look at how the Fed's buying corporate bonds, high-yield junk bonds, ETFs, munis, record bond issuance, massive liquidity for so-called credit support that's literally collapsing. You have companies like BlackRock, which is a government liaison to the public, for selling these instruments, getting paid tens of millions of dollars when the public can go online and buy them direct. And they're charging the people and the Fed 3% commission paid for by the taxpayers. Remember, we pay for everything via taxes and inflation. So more wealth transfer from the little guy to the top 1%. And I hear the music coming. I have a lot more details to speak about, Vince, on what needs to be done to maybe have some powers that be in the White House care about the little people and do something about it. We'll be right back after this break, folks.
Rich Scheben's with us in Montana, and he's giving us a detailed explanation of negative interest rates, what that means to you, and we'll get to the point where, what do you do about it? Rich Scheben, back to you.
Yeah, and I'm going to incorporate, Vince, the part of what you need to do about it, because I've given this talk before years ago. And now I know some people are thinking, should I go out and buy zero-coupon bonds? I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying that everything in this corrupt world is about speculation, hedging, and guessing, and gambling. Because we, the little people, don't get the inside information. So that being said, I'm going to dovetail. I'm trying to build up some information here so people get what's going on, because we are allowing the powers that be to confuse liquidity and solvency. We are allowing them to socialize their losses and capitalize their gains. So instead of doing bailouts for the elite, we need to give bailouts to the middle class, because part of the whole communist insurrection that's happening, one of the main portions for their success is to eliminate the middle class. And I know this audience is aware of that. So I'm going to make suggestions, hoping that maybe there's somebody in the elite Washington, D.C. crowd that actually gives a crap about the people. So as long as we allow ourselves to be groomed and be desensitized for the wrong things and cowardly offended and overly sensitized for things that lower the bars of standards and expectations, especially for jobs, as long as we keep drinking the Kool-Aid of political correctness, things are not going to get better. We can't allow things like victim group status to give excuses, alibis, and justifications and smokescreens for the elite to steal money from the little guy, because that's exactly what's happening. And so let me get into this, some suggestions, what really needs to happen. We need to take the mean household debt. I'm going to just shoot from the hip. I don't know what that number is. And say, let's say it's $30,000. Okay? What we need to do, instead of bailing out the wealthy. Now, has President Trump been giving some checks and helping out small businesses and the little people? Absolutely. But there's also a very huge price to pay if consumer confidence in the Federal Reserve note, or U.S. dollar, goes away, or we lose the formal crown of world reserve currency status. These are all huge issues. I think what needs to happen is if we're going to go to sound money, the president has to allow the little people X amount of Federal Reserve notes to be able to buy silver or gold at a certain price, because the elite are going to buy everything up because they're going to get the inside track. So we have to protect the little people. So regarding the mean household debt, let's say it's $30,000. We give that to each home for people who make under a certain amount of money, like these PPP loans have been so abused. So many people, wealthy people, we've given names of people and companies on this show. Multimillionaires have taken advantage of this and had bought luxurious items and vacations with it. And the people pay for it, again, through taxation or inflation. So if we had that, let's say there was a $30,000 check that went to everybody who made less than $100,000. I'm shooting from the hip. Don't shoot the messenger here. I'm just giving examples. The people who owe that debt, they have to pay it off to their creditors. Okay? So they get to be out of debt. The people who are out of debt in the first place get rewarded for living below their means and knowing the fine lines between needs and wants. This way, the people who are the savers, who are frugal, who do the right thing, don't get penalized. And then you have, let's say, a year to pay to go out and buy goods. And then this way you get rewarded for your frugality and living below your means. And I got way more to say after the break. Man, these breaks come up quick, Vince. We appreciate you being here, folks. Hopefully we can give you some good information. We'll be back after the break.
Rich Scheben with us, and we've been talking about negative interest rates and what it means to you. And we're going to get to the point where we tell you why this is important. And so what Rich has been telling you is, with negative interest rates combined with inflation, you have less over time. The longer you put your, we'll call it cash, in a bank, for example, that pays negative interest rates, the less you're going to have over time. So you put in $1 and you're going to get less than $1 out. Combine that with the reduction in the purchasing power through the negatives of inflation, meaning it'll cost you more units of measure, meaning more dollars to buy that thing that you would have bought before. So it's going to cost more units and you're going to have less of them. So it's a double whammy. And that's what Rich is telling us about. Rich, please continue.
Yeah, thanks, man. So I could talk about this stuff for 6 hours. So I'm going to shortcut my solutions here because we just don't have enough time, folks, and I apologize for that. But what we need to do, and you heard me say this in piecemeal off and on because I do shortcut a lot of things because of time. What we need to do is stop creating avenues for the elite to give opportunities only to the ass-kissers, yes men, tattletales, what group you're in, selling out the little guy. When you delegitimize truth, you basically leaves you with, never mind no truth, but you delegitimize work. And it just basically allows the wealthy people to buy the narratives where the little people are racking up delinquencies, defaults, and bankruptcies. So what we need to do is we need to have that, let's say that $30,000 I use as an example, I shot from the hip with that, and give it to people to either get out of debt or the people who have done the right thing to go out and buy things. Now, could that velocity of money create an inflation situation? Possibly, at least a little bit, but I can't see the Federal Reserve note lasting that many years, at least in having that much purchasing power. That's why negative interest rates, it could be a benefit if the things I'm about to say happen, because then the little people can buy houses with virtually no risk. When you have zero interest rate or close to it, what's it called if you default? It's called renting. That means you don't have much risk, just like the big guys have had, okay? And if the Federal Reserve note's going to lose purchasing power over time in the near future, that means your amortization schedule towards the back end, even possibly the middle or the beginning, could be a huge benefit because you could be paying back your loans in what I call quote-unquote chicken feed. So this could be, without looking at it, I can't predict the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but this could be the best time to buy. But what we're saying at USA Prepares is get out of urban, suburban America. Go rural, buy 20 to 40 acres if you can, have a garden, raise some animals, buy a wood lot, and start relearning those lost 19th century skills, but you can still dovetail them with 21st century technology. So what we need also is some type of means testing. We need laws of excess because this will never end. You have 8 people with a higher net worth than half the world, half the country. You cannot allow the elite to make all the laws, to basically create NGOs or any type of disguise to have their agenda and protect themselves. They get all the loopholes, they get everything. We are allowing us to poison us against ourselves. We're allowing the elite to poison us against ourselves. So we need laws of excess. Let's say if we had, and I'm shooting from the hip again, you can't have more of a $10 million net worth. All the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Soros, they always say, oh, it's the male's fault. Oh, it's the white male's fault. Well, how come, have you ever thought that Bezos, Buffett, Soros, Zuckerberg, Gates, the Cuomos, Anderson Cooper, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Cooks, the Murdochs, the Clintons will have, no one's asking, including Hollywood and the mainstream media, no one's asking for them to confiscate their wealth because they're pale-skinned. And yet Chelsea Clinton gets a job right out of college for almost $1 million a year, and her mother flies around the world talking about white privilege and carbon footprints for the little people. Think about double standards and hypocrisies here, folks. We're getting to the point that it has nothing to do with what skin pigmentation, what gender, what sexual orientation. In fact, here's a really good Twitter post from James Woods. It's very short. America is not divided by race, color, gender, or sexual orientation. America is divided into wise people and fools. And fools divide themselves by race, color, gender, or sexual orientation. So you've heard me talk about this for years. When you have certain people feel obligated and entitled to play the victim group status card, and then they demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job or based on what group you're in, you eliminate any chance of success because hard work, proven results, qualifications now mean nothing. Basically, what you're doing is you're doubting your own value. And then the same people demand no protection rights or restitution under the rule of law for the people affected who have been targeted for this. Because let's say, they're a white male. Guess what you do? You create precedents to eliminate the rule of law. And you're protecting the most destructive, illegal, corrupt companies in the world by giving them liability immunity. You are enabling wealth inequality to occur. I want you to think about that. You're enabling wealth inequality to occur. So corruption, manipulation, fraud, racketeering, crimes, pedophilia, treason, sedition, espionage. No transparency, no light at the end of the tunnel for the other people. That creates no confidence in the system because of all these hypocrisies and double standards. This makes us an unaccountable, non-functional, unsustainable gig economy. So what we also need is we need to increase the mortgages for the little people. Maybe 30 years, maybe for 5 years, we go to 100-year mortgages. Now, again, I'm shooting from the hip. We need to get rid of this casino bank stuff that I talked about a moment ago. We need to reinstate a Glass-Steagall type legislation. We have to also look at all these unit of measures, like GDP. How can GDP be relevant at all in a situation when 70% of consumption in America rates is the unit of measure for GDP? It can no longer be done. It's no longer relevant. We can't buy happiness with GDP ratings or all these other unit of measures that words have been hijacked by definition to use as mostly tools of division and cloaks of disguise. So we need to do all these things, and we need to go dismantle central banks. Besides, I talk about group identity politics a lot. I talk about central banks, Keynesian economics, and of course our present demographic situation. I spent hours on all this. But we need to talk about changing our debt-based currency. We need to audit the Fed. We need to reevaluate opportunities for little people. When I try to hire 30 attorneys and they tell me I didn't have they didn't have enough group self-pity points. Group self-pity points. These are divide and conquer strategies. This makes people, because of ego, and they don't want to admit they were wrong. Basically, they automatically, it's a psyop. They want to defend their group and their hyphen and their pronoun. We are literally giving free lunch to the elite while they are abandoning the rule of law, creating their own precedents, making divide and conquer strategies against us. And we have people in our ranks selling out to the highest bidder while they're using our taxpayer dollars to manufacture the perception of their self-importance and self-preservation. And we also need to break up all big companies. The word oligarchy and monopoly need to be done, especially in the realm of big tech. In fact, I have so many articles here about big tech, I'm not even going to be getting into regarding censorship, regarding surveillance, regarding voter fraud and dominance. And, oh, my God, there's just, censoring conservatives, not allowing conservative apps. I mean, I can go on and on. Helping communist China. I mean, it's gotten to the point where the Democrats, the mainstream media, Hollywood, and the powers that be have literally sold out to treason and sedition with China against the American people. And this is why we have so much corruption, racketeering, leaks, espionage, treason, sedition, fraud, and malicious, nefarious use of power, and all this partisan bias. Treason is violation of the allegiance owed to the sovereign state against the Constitution, given aid and comfort to our enemy. Well, the Democrats want nothing to do with the Constitution. How many professors and scientists under the veil of universities have we allowed this type of stuff to happen? I mean, it's, and I know I have articles somewhere in here regarding that, which I'll probably never get to. And sedition is stirring up resistance, discord, rebellion against the government and power. This is what's happening. This is what big tech is doing. The phony philanthropists are doing. The people who are saying we don't have protection and rights under the rule of law because we don't have enough group self-pity points. This is what is happening to the little people. So we need to get rid of all these big companies. They need to be split up. We need to have laws of access. We need to stop the lobbyists, the special interests, and the PACs. We need the people to decide how much net worth needs to be had at the very top, because the powers that be are buying and paying for everybody. They're funding both sides of wars, NGOs, geoengineering, including man-made bioweapons. You know, we need to, if we go, we need to reincorporate Glass-Steagall. We need to have means testing. We need to increase the years of mortgage on the amortization schedule. We need to take that household debt and maybe eliminate it from the little people and give that money to the people who have done the right thing with frugality and living below their means so they don't get penalized. We need to dismantle central banks, dismantle debt-based currency, audit the Fed, and we need to transfer power back to the people, like Donald Trump said when he first got elected. And I see so much cowardly, treasonous people at the top. Donald Trump, I don't see him having any support. We have coups against a duly elected president. We have phony dossiers on and on and on, and nothing's getting done. We'll be right back, folks.
So, Rich, you've mentioned the real plan is to get out of the urban and suburban environment. There is no substitute for that. If you want to have freedom, that's what you're going to have to do. It's as simple as that. Rich?
Well, absolutely, because they're going to continue to distract, dumb down, and divide the American people. You know, here we have an article which is extremely insulting to minorities. California is lowering the bar exam in order to pass more minority lawyers. You know, this is a bunch of crap. And Larry Elder just came out with a new documentary titled Uncle Tom, which is waking a lot of people up. And, you know, when they say, oh, every black or every female or every transgender or every homosexual or every this, it's all a bunch of crap. We're all Americans, and we need to learn to read and research and think for ourselves. Even everything that we say, all the articles that I'm mentioning here are all published in the public domain. You need to verify the things that even I say so you can prove that it's not right, because what they're doing, and I've said this for years, is race baiting. Race, gender, sexual, religion. They're manufacturing pity, guilt, and the perception of everything. Their job is to sway public opinion by basically owning the narratives. This is how they divide people. You don't, with group identity politics, okay, if we don't have the same rules, laws, and accountability stand for truth, then forget about it. America's done, because they're using professional wordsmithing, media propaganda, subliminal messaging, and they're insulting, degrading, and disrespecting you at the same time. They're saying you can't compete. Your work is suboptimal. They're insulting your work ethic, ability, and intelligence. No example or country in the world has divided the people for the benefit of the people. It's in order to bring in communist insurrection, authoritarianism, totalitarianism. To basically, it's an elite takeover in a few words. You don't empower a nation or a person or a group by lowering the bars of standards and expectations. What you're doing is making people submissive. You're breaking their will. You are literally destroying America by the rewarding of mediocrity, which eliminates opportunity, productivity, innovation, ingenuity for the little guy. it doesn't do any benefits to the people. You know, that James Wood tweet is something that we've been saying on this show for years in different words. And, you know, we're in some very deep crap right now. You know, President Trump just signed an executive order on hiring Americans. That's called guts. That's the things that we need. We need to take care of our homeland first before we take care of other people, when the Democrats are literally trying to divide and conquer the nation. And why is that important? Because New Jersey is now legally allowing illegals, think about that, to obtain professional licenses. You know, there's a lot of things that goes on behind the scenes. When I talk about something, you know, some people who are thinking emotionally think we're all racist, bigots, sexist, misogynist, homophobic, intolerant, violent, hater, conspiracy theorists, anti-this with an ism, is, and phobia on the back of every word. That's a bunch of crap, because those people aren't thinking 3, 4, 5, 6 moves ahead. They're not playing good chess. They're not shooting good pool. Because that's what the enemies of anti-American are doing. Just like Nevada passes a bill to allow 100% mail-in voting. Well, this guy Lawrence Tribe reveals that there's a plot to make Nancy Pelosi president. You know how they're going to do this, folks? They're going to have mail-in voting, and the voting they're going to basically take a long time to count the votes, and they're going to postpone either the election or the counting of the votes for the election, and then Congress is going to basically put in their own president. That's what they're trying to do. And if you don't think that thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 moves ahead has any validity, then you need to do more reading and research, because this is very serious stuff right here. And big tech is doing everything in our power to make sure this information doesn't get to the people. You know, all this anti-white male stuff. Okay, court documents. Bill Clinton alleged to have appeared on Epstein's Island. We've known about this for years, but he's been on the Layola Express, or whatever that express plane is. I mean, we've known that we've seen the logs of the planes. Bill Clinton denies Guthrie allegation he went to Epstein's Island. I think Guthrie is, I don't know, she could be that Ghislaine Maxwell's real name, with 2 young girls. Never been. Well, as Bill Clinton would say, it all depends on how you define been. Records of Prince Andrew location on night of molestation destroyed by police. Okay, OAC says Hawaiian statue of priest who served lepers is a white supremacist culture. Folks, there's nothing to do with white or male. It's everything to do with the aristocracy controlling the serfs. Get it? Everything is a scam. We'll be back after the break.
You know, Rich, you mentioned Prince Andrew, and they say in England that was a matter of national security. They can't have those records lying around. That's what they said.
Yeah,
Can you imagine
that's
that?
That's called a fraud, scam, excuse, enable.
When we come back, I've got a couple comments about the spy technology that you mentioned. Class Rich Scheben's with us, and Rich is in Montana. And Rich, I believe you mentioned big tech and spy tech and how it's impacting us. And I have a couple comments. It'll take me about 2 minutes to mention this. And I'm going to give you some personal information about the Finelli family. I probably shouldn't do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, big tech, we're talking about Verizon, we're talking about Microsoft, we're talking about Facebook, we're talking about Google, we're talking about all of it. Okay? They monitor your cell phone calls. And what they do is they take a lot of data bits of information and they put it together into a database, and then they have an AI application go through there and figure out certain things. So they monitor your health. Okay, you've got the Fitbit. Well, some people have a Fitbit. We don't, and I'm pretty sure our class doesn't, but some people do. That tells the cloud how you're doing, your heart rate. They can tell when you're exercising, when you're sleeping, and so forth. So they know when you get up. They know when you go to sleep. They know when you're active, when you're highly active. They know your driving habits because you have your cell phone with you, and they know the speed that the vehicle is traveling. They know the kind of acceleration. They know where you travel. They know whether you're speeding through different speed zones. Okay, so for example, if it's a 35-mile-an-hour zone, they know that. The GPS knows exactly what the speed limits are in the area where you're traveling. They know where you are, and they know how fast you're going. So they know how whether you're speeding or not. They know whether your driving behavior is erratic. They can correlate that with crashes and accidents and insurance claims. They know where you live. They know the kind of clothing that you wear because there are images of you from your cell phone camera and Facebook. They know if you live in a clean or a messy house because when you talk on your cell phone and you do FaceTime and things like that, the background images are picked up. They know whether you wear the same clothes over and over and over again. They know whether you dress in shabby clothes or expensive clothes. They've read your emails. They've scored your emails. They know where you shop. They have read your text. They know when you get angry. They know when you're unhappy. They listen to your intonation. They know when you yell and scream and have fights in your house because of Echo and Siri and the rest of it. They're always listening. They have cameras on your smartphone, smart TVs. They have speakers on the smart TVs. They know when you're happy. They know when you use the bathroom during the commercials. They know a lot about you that you just can't imagine. They know how happy you are. They literally do. Because, as I mentioned, the intonation in your voice. They know if you're protesting. They know if you talk about, geez, we can't pay these bills. Geez, how are we going to meet our rent payment? How are we going to meet our mortgage payment? The car broke down. What are we going to do? They know all these things because you've said them in your house. Now I'm going to contrast that with my house. I don't have a cell phone. We just got one of our bank statements that said, here's how much we need to pay for one of our credit cards. We have a few credit cards. The highest, I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you that I figured this out. Just now I figured this out. So I'm sharing it with you. Mrs. Finelli opened the mail and she said, what do you think our credit score is? I said, 832. Said no. So, 840. 840. Our credit score is 840 out of a possible 850. Nobody gets higher than an 850 credit score. Ours is 840. Now, I'm not bragging, but I'm going to tell you what happened. If you have a credit score, I'm looking at a chart right now. So an excellent credit score, 780 to 850. And that says you qualify for the best interest rates. So when you go to borrow money, if your credit score is between 780 and 850, you get the lowest rates. A credit score of 740 to 779 is considered very good. And you usually qualify, not always, but usually qualify for the best interest rates. If your credit score is 720 to 739, that's a little above average, and you are going to have to pay higher interest rates. If it's 680 to 719, that's considered average. Many qualify for, most loans, but you pay higher interest rates. Now, 620 to 679 is below average. You're going to have to pay significantly higher interest rates. If your credit rating is 580 to 619, that's considered poor. You're probably not going to qualify for most loans. These aren't my words. These are industry terms and industry ratings. So if your credit score is 520 to 579, you've got several credit issues and you're unlikely to qualify for any loan. That's considered very poor. Less than 520 is considered bad. You're facing extreme credit issues according to their definitions, meaning the banking definitions. This affects your homeowner's insurance. This affects your automobile insurance. This affects your banking relationships, borrowing money, etc. The worse your credit score, the more they're going to charge you because you're considered a higher risk. Now, how is it possible to get, for the Finelli family with virtually no income, to have a credit score of 840? How is that possible? Because they don't know so much about us. Because we don't have a Fitbit. We don't do a lot of searches on the internet that we're very careful about what we search for. And we don't have a smartphone. So they don't track us where we go, how fast we travel, and those kinds of things. We drive older vehicles without GPS tracking systems on them. Now, I looked up just now during the break, what does it take to get an 850 credit score? We're at 840. What would it take to get to be at the top of the heap? Well, we'll never get there, and I'll tell you why. You have to have 21 credit cards in order to get an 850 credit score. We don't have 21 credit cards. And you have to pay your credit card statement in full before the due date, and we can't do that either. So what I'm saying is, if it's due at, let's say, on the 30th of the month, they want you to pay it on the 15th of the month, early. Now, you got to be stupid to do that. Why would you pay your bill before it's due? Okay? And with the mail today, the mail is intentionally delayed. So now what's happening is the banks, the credit card banks, are printing the statements on the 1st of the month. They're letting them sit around for a few days. Then they go to the mail. The mail's delayed. By the time you get it, it's the 20th or 25th of the month, and it's due on the 30th. And they want it 10 days before it's due. It's impossible. If you mail it the day you get it, it's still going to be late. And that's what's happening. So that's what happens to us. So what I'm saying is, I've just, in my little tiny example, I've proven why you should not have a cell phone. Because with no income, my family's below the poverty line. If you add up how much we make farming, we are below the national poverty line. We're probably below everybody in the country. Everybody makes more than we do, but yet we have a credit score of 840. How's that possible? I just told you. Dump that cell phone. Be careful who uses your internet. Don't share your internet with anyone, because their searches may drive up your credit score. How about that? Seriously. If you've got a lousy credit score, you're going to pay more for automobile insurance than someone who has a great credit score. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? And you might say, well, what the heck does a credit score have to do with insurance rates? Well, literally, the insurance companies, the automobile insurance companies, consider you a higher risk if you have a lousy credit score. Any comments for Scheben on what I just said?
Well, I'm confused, Vince. How could mail take so long to get there when the post office just made a $10 billion loan available to them as far as the coronavirus relief? How can that be? This is sarcasm.
I can tell you.
Oh,
okay.
This is sarcasm.
I was going to tell you.
Think about when a federal government institution takes out a loan or creates a union, we're paying for all of it. We're paying for the dues indirectly. We're paying for the interest indirectly. It's all a scam. Technology is being used for the weapons of the plutocracy. The Google, Facebook, Twitter, they're controlling everything. Apple, all the fangs, they want to eliminate free speech. They are literally creating crimes against the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, collusion, racketeering, abuse of antitrust, monopoly, laws. This is why I always talk about practice what you preach laws. This is why I talk about how we need public forums in every town, or at least every few counties where we can share ideas and solutions publicly. We need citizen review boards. We need laws of access. When I talk about ideas and solutions, I don't just talk about it so I can be blue in the face, so I can just say something to say something. These are ideas that actually would work. But see, there's so much corruption behind the scenes, we don't get the representation. And speaking of corruption, Vince, I'd like to, for the sake of my Montana friends, I want to bring forth an article. Governor Steve Bullock of Montana is being accused of intimidating auditors of his State Department and Public Health over concerns of potential welfare fraud of a prominent Native American reservation. So basically, there's claims against him intimidating state officials within departments and ignoring fraud after they discovered a substantial number of fraudulent welfare payments going to the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation. You see, whether they're buying votes, and this stuff doesn't get to the people. Let me read at least the first two comments, if you don't mind. Quote, you mean the fraud that's going on?
Rich, before you do that, did you have any other comments about what I said about the credit scores and how it affects your life, your financial life? And I'm not kidding about that?
Well, it absolutely does. It affects the middle class and the poor who actually need credit. You don't have any desire to take out any more loans. Now that I'm officially in my 60s, I just don't feel the need to do that unless it's an emergency. But, yeah, it's basically they want people who take out loans, who don't pay principal, who pay interest, and that's part of the debt-backed system that we talked about, that I talked about today, that we've talked about many, many times. Absolutely.
Okay, Rich Scheben and I are going to be right back. Class, what I was trying to illustrate with that example is that you don't have to have a lot of money to have a good credit score. You just have to be darn careful with what you do. And you can be out of debt. It's not magic. It takes diligence, it takes planning, it takes preparation, it takes sacrifice, but you can do it. You can do it. Class, I just wanted to say that what I mentioned before about credit scores, credit ratings, Rich Scheben and I have arrived at a similar place independently. I didn't know Rich Scheben all my life. He figured it out. I figured it out. And others have figured it out as well. And what we determined was borrowing money to buy things that you can't afford is beyond crazy. And most people do that. And that's why most people don't have any money, because they want that new shiny stainless steel refrigerator, washer, dryer, whatever it is. They want it because, well, it's new and it's fashionable. And they want expensive clothing and so forth. So they've gone out and done that, and they've had the vacations, and they've spent the money, and it's gone, and they have to borrow money to survive. And that's why we're here today, meaning the United States of America, that's one of the reasons we got here. And Rich Scheben and I, if we can't afford it, we don't buy it. If we haven't already saved for it, knowing that ahead of time that we might need it, we don't buy it. We save for it. And then when we have enough money to buy it, then we buy it. And only when we need it. Tomorrow it's Gwyneth. Then Thursday it's going to be me with my unfinished, unpublished, not available for sale book called Since You Mentioned Cars. That will be on Thursday. And then Friday, Kathy's going to be with us. We're going to be talking about textiles, clothing. How can you tell good clothing from not so good clothing and other textile products? What to look for? No one has ever done a broadcast on that I know of. That'll be Friday, hour number 1. Hour number 2, the Carrington event, 1859, when the solar storm blew up the telegraph system, and how dangerous this is. And we're going to tell you what you need to do to protect yourself from the next solar flare, the big one. Okay, Rich Scheben, back to you.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons of being out of debt gives us an opportunity, Vince, to help a lot of other people. A lot of people, the powers that be, they throw seeds out there. Oh, God, they're talking about themselves, or, oh, God, they're bragging, or, oh, God. No, what we need to do is talk about personal experience, because there's no credibility in stories if you're not talking first-hand truth. Because like I always say, everything turns into second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand gossip, rumors, and hearsay. There's no credibility in that. And that's a perfect example of Russia, Ukraine, Stormy Daniels, the Mueller trial, that you, the taxpayers, have paid hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions, of all this corruption and hoaxes and propaganda and false flags. So when we are out of debt, we get to do things like the radio shows we do, the talks that we do out in public, the gardening that we do, the produce. I give half my produce away. I give half of my meat and fish away that I catch. I give free financial counseling. I have someone who's renting a piece of property from me, and they have two beautiful little kids, and I basically am probably giving them half price of what I could rent it out for. We get to do, when we get to be out of debt, and it's not about bragging, it's not about, oh, look what I can do. No, it's about how we can turn something into positive news and help others with it, and especially by practicing what we preach. And that's
Rich,
why
let me ask you a personal question, and if you don't want to answer this, don't answer it. But I believe that the last vehicle that you bought, I'm not going to mention what it is, but I believe that the last vehicle that you bought was a used vehicle and you paid cash for it. And it was not a lot of money because you got it at a very good price for a quality machine, but you saved up for it and you paid cash for it. And that's exactly what I've done. I mean, my old truck, my 2004 two-tone truck, white, well, a little bit of white, mostly rust color with a little bit of white on it. That was $3,000. Okay? My old 1996, nothing special to look at, diesel Mercedes that nobody wants, with a couple 100,000, maybe 250,000 miles on it. Nobody would want one. $3,000 cash. That's the kind of, isn't that the way you think of things?
Well, that's an exact example of helping others. Folks, I bought this car because Vince Finelli went shopping for me in Missouri, and I bought this car he was the liaison for the purchase, which I paid very little money for, and bought this 1991 Mercedes. Granted, it's 30 years old, it's a classic, but it works very well, and this is a perfect example of us helping each other. We'll be right back after the break.
Rich Scheben's with us. And Rich, I wanted to mention, I see the call screen's lit up. Class, we've announced that we will not be taking calls today. So I know that anyone's on hold. You can hear this message. So I just want to let you know we're not going to be taking calls today. Rich Scheben, you have multiple degrees and at the university level. And I finished my last one in 1978. And so 2 years after that, so I didn't learn this in school, but 2 years after that, 1980, there was an economic theory. It's called the pizza principle. Now, don't laugh, but it's true. Now, when I say pizza, I'm going to spell it for you to make sure you can clearly understand what I'm saying. P-I-Z-Z-A. So it's this round piece of dough with some tomato sauce on it and some mozzarella cheese and some spices and maybe some pepperoni, maybe some onions. And anyway, that's a pizza, right? So there was this guy in New York, and you're from New York, Rich Scheben. So this guy from New York thought about the price of a slice of pizza and the cost of a subway fare, subway token. Now, subway fares used to be, when the subway first was available for ridership, the cost of a subway fare was 5 cents in the early 1900s. 5 cents. And it was that price, I'm going by memory, I think all the way until like 1945. And then it kept increasing. I remember buying a subway token for 35 cents back in the 70s when I was interviewed for a job on Wall Street by Shearson, Hayden, Stone, which I decided I didn't want to do that. So anyway, the pizza principle or the pizza theory or the pizza economic theory is that the cost of a slice of pizza is the same as the cost of a subway token. And as the subway tokens went up, or as the cost of pizza went up, so did the subway tokens. And currently, it's absolutely true. So a subway token has gone up 55 times what it used to be. It used to be 5 cents, now it's $2.75. A slice of pizza, $2.83 in New York City. Have you heard of that, Rich Scheben, the pizza principle? Now, I'm not kidding. It's absolutely true. I'm not making it up.
No, I don't disagree with you at all, Vince, but the pizza principle, in my lingo, how I've always used as an example, is in the context of the slices of pizza not only getting more expensive, but the slices of pizza getting smaller for the bottom 93%. And we're all fighting for the crumbs and divvying things up. You know, just examples like this. You know, the judge blocks President Trump's migrant welfare rule. Okay? And another article right here, pissed off teachers union. They demand pay for doing nothing. They want to teach virtual reality out of the classroom because of the so-called COVID stuff. So basically, when we talk about inflation, and we talk about the pieces of pizza getting smaller and smaller and getting more expensive, the little people are paying for all this inflation with illegal immigrants regarding education, regarding car insurance, regarding hospitalizations and health care, because the people like illegal immigrants, and it's not being racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, anti-this, or ismist, or phobia that. It's the fact that when you don't pay your fair share, and you can walk into an ER, you can walk into a school, or you can walk in, or you can get a free driver's license, or get a driver's license without having to pay for car insurance, the cost shifting gets overwhelmed by the people who are paying for it, especially the little people. And that's how I refer to the pizza principle regarding the slices of pizza getting smaller and smaller for each person, Vince.
Well, that's absolutely true. And so, class, what we're trying to tell you is 55x. Think about that. A slice of pizza is a Subway token is 55x. When I remember, back in the 70s, I could go to the pizza joint and buy one slice for 25 cents. And then it went up. I couldn't believe how much it went up. It went up to 35 cents, which was an enormous percentage increase. I mean, absolutely enormous. I remember making sub sandwiches at a sandwich joint when I was in high school, after school, high school. It was an honor to have a job, you know, it really was. And I was making sub sandwiches behind the counter, and you could buy what they called an Italian sub for 35 cents. Now, if you wanted to, that'd be a half a loaf of submarine bread. I'm not talking about a Subway brand, which is a little tiny thing. I'm talking about a real independent sub shop. It's probably 8 inches long and, wide. Not this little skinny piece of bread that Subway uses, a real big sub sandwich. And half of one of those was a meal. It was 36 cents for the Italian one, and it was 41 cents for the ultra deluxe turkey. 41 cents. That's lettuce, tomato, onions, hot peppers, sweet peppers. And it was big. And it was great. Well, how much is it now? A haircut. A boy's haircut was 25 cents when I was a boy. How much is it now? It's $11. Minimum. Minimum plus tip, of course. So things have gone up. They've gone up out of control. They've gone up. A first class stamp when I was a child was 4 cents. Now it's 55 cents. What happened? So the post office automated. They brought in all kinds of machines to replace all kinds of people. And the price of a stamp went from 4 cents to 55 cents. And it used to be that you could get mail within a couple days. Now they're saying, well, we can't, we're going to send people home. It used to be that the post office, when it was the United States mail, it used to be U.S. mail. Let me say it a different way. U.S. mail. Now it's United States Postal Service. It's a quasi-government / private organization. It's not the United States government anymore. They have improved that to the point where they've now said recently that we don't want to have anybody finishing the mail. You don't go. It used to be that you wouldn't go home until all the day's mail was moved, meaning sent out. So if it came in for delivery or sent to another postal office, the office was empty. All new mail that came in that day was out by the end of the day. Not anymore. Now it's, it's 5 o'clock and y'all are going home. Just leave it. We'll get to it tomorrow or the next day or the day after or whenever. Do you know what that means? That means that mail is going to get lost at an exponential rate. Mail is going to be stolen at an exponential rate. Bills are not going to be paid. Your credit score is going to go down, down, down. And then the banks are going to say, I don't believe you anymore. This is the 6th time that you've called and you said that you're not paying the late fee because you mailed the payment on time. We don't believe you anymore. That's what's going to happen. Then your insurance rates are going to go up for your homeowners. Your loan costs are going to go up. Your automobile insurance is going to go up. Everything's going to go up because the post office decided that they aren't going to process the mail the way they used to.
And folks, and pardon the interruption, Vince, this is why it's so important. Like when Nevada, the articles I mentioned earlier, and Vince, I know I take a lot of airtime, and I appreciate you allowing me to exercise my First Amendment rights. But I try to save a lot of important articles for the air, like when Nevada passes a bill allowing 100% mail-in voting. I think President Trump is going to sue. But when you have lawyers and judges who are bought and paid for, it's very difficult to do these days. You know, like I mentioned, they are planning to either put in Nancy Pelosi or somebody else as president, because if there's a delay in the voting, and mail-in voting is the key to this, if there's a delay in the voting counts or anything, they're going to put in a temporary president, and I use the term temporary in quotes, and they're going to get rid of President Trump. This is a shakedown. This is very serious stuff. And Vince, if you don't mind, would you mind me mentioning a few more articles because we're running out of time, please?
Go ahead. I'll hit the mute button. Go ahead.
All right, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. And I apologize for this, but Vince, you were talking about technology, and I always try to talk about it, how it's crimes against the Bill of Rights and Constitution and freedom of speech and antitrust monopoly laws like collusion, racketeering, all this stuff. And I just want to mention some articles here real quick regarding the importance of how technology is going over the top. They're uncontrollable right now. Matt Getz says Google is using market dominance in search engines to engage in election interference. This is serious stuff. Jim Jordan cites censorship of Breitbart News. Matt Getz and Jim Jordan, you are two people who are in Congress who are actually doing some good. And when I say Congress, I mean the Senate. I mean elected officials. Rand Paul, same thing. Next article. Tim Cook claims Apple treats every developer the same, but has banned conservative apps. Next article. Republican buck slams Google CEO for refusing to work on Pentagram program while helping communist China. Folks, this is really serious stuff. The Democrats and big tech are allied with our enemy. Next article. Senator Kelly Loeffler. We must use every possible means to stop big tech censorship. You think? Donald Trump, Congress, all talk and no action on big tech. He's absolutely right. He's surrounded by traitors and communists and cowards. Next article. Twitter suspends Prager University, prominent conservatives, and doctors for commenting on HCQ, hydrochlorox. I can't pronounce it right now, but you know what I mean. Hydroxychloroquine. There we go. See, when I talk too fast, it doesn't always work out real well. Next article. Twitter censors President Trump, but not Ayatollah Khomeini. You know, this guy who owns Twitter, he literally should be arrested for lying to Congress. I mean, see, this is why I say we have a different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what group you're in. It's not black-white. It's not gender. It's not sexual orientation. It's not religion. They are using us as pawns against each other. Trump is banning TikTok. Well, President Trump, it's not okay for Microsoft to ban TikTok, to buy TikTok. TikTok or anything owned by the Chinese should be ousted out of this country. And Matt Getz, Congress will not do anything on big tech because Congress is bought off by big tech. See, this is a big problem, folks. We're not represented. Congress does not represent us. Congress represents the lobbyists and the PACs and the special interests. And this is a big problem. This is a really big problem. And we need to at least make term limits and see they're going to vote against term limits. And I want to mention a few other articles here before we run out of time. Former labor counselor avoids jail for massive child porn library. Avoids jail. See, it's all about whatever the narrative is. If it's sick enough and if the elite proves it, no big deal. War on the suburbs, how HUD's housing policies become a weapon for social change. This is why I use terms urban, suburban together, because they're all connected. We could talk about that for an hour, but I don't have the time. U-Haul rates show mass exodus from Seattle. I've mentioned this regarding other places like Portland and Illinois and other places as well. Holland's top scientists. Absolutely no scientific evidence masks work. I saw pictures of Amsterdam. The people...
Rich Scheben's with us, and we're talking about current state of the economic affairs of the United States. Currently, in 2019, there were 130 million people working full-time. And as of last 19 weeks, 54 million people have applied for unemployment insurance. 54 out of 130 million. It's staggering. Class, if you don't think that this is the second Great Depression, you're not paying attention. This is worse than the first Great Depression. Rich Scheben?
Well, there's a lot to be worried about, Vince, and listeners. You know, Lightfoot, Chicago, murder soars 139%. Minneapolis police are telling residents to give in to criminals and give them your money and your cell phone, etc. Black Lives Matter out of Louisville are basically shaking down businesses for profits for protection. That's like the old term USSR, what they did in Russia back in the day. It's basically mafia, like the Russian mafia. Mysterious dwarf swarm breached secure airspace over largest nuclear power plant in the U.S. Get out of urban, suburban America, folks. Democrat Moulton says red states are going to get what's coming to them with the virus. Is that an implication that they're going to release another virus on the people? CIA fabricated Russiagate evidence, says former NSA tech chief. Are there any Americans left? Do our intelligence agencies, what are you feeling? Is there any pride anymore? I mean, Vince, I'm so worried about our country right now. You know, we have Joe Biden. He goes out to Ukraine, spends billions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer dollars to stop investigations on his own son. But it's an impeachable offense if Donald Trump inquires about it, while Obama is running spying ring and running a coup of shadowing him around the world, committing treason and sedition. And spying is now routine. It's now a precedent. It's unbelievable. We have contact tracers going to people's houses using mass surveillance to quarantine people. Anybody who doesn't do the right thing, they have to cede their rights while they're being spied on. You know, it's very disturbing what's happening. And when I see, you know, Barr and Durham and a lot of people in the so-called power structure that's supposed to be the good guys, basically slapping hands. I know there's been some declassifications, but we need them to come out. We have to stop this drip, drip, drip of a little here and a little there. You know, we need names, we need videos, especially with the pedophile networks. We need all the declassifications that we've talked about to come out. I mean, you're getting to the point where it's un-American for the census to count how many non-Americans are in America. The Democrats complain about Russians influencing our elections, which barely happen. The Democrats influence our elections along with Ukraine and the Chinese allies than Russia did. But God forbid we have voter ID laws, because it's racist, it's bigot, sexist, misogynist, xenophobe, intolerant, blah, 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 blah. You know, illegals don't need IDs, but citizens need it just for about everything. U.S. citizens being fined for not buying their own health insurance, but we're being forced to pay through cost shifting for illegal health care, car insurance, and education, which I just mentioned. People who've never been to college, who've paid off their own college debts. The people want them to pay the huge college loan of the students that have over-leveraged themselves when 90% of the degrees are worthless. Malinvestment. But the wealthy people can bribe universities for their own kids' scholarships, test scores, degrees, and literally buy them a scholarship. Vince, it's getting to the point where common sense, logic, rule of law, legitimizing the delegitimization of work, the delegitimization of, as I mentioned with Dr. Sheila yesterday, of the rule of law, of medicine. And we are literally enabling and protecting the most corrupt companies in the country and the world with liability immunity, which basically destroys more capitalism, creates more fraud, more illegitimacy, more fascism, and more wealth inequality.
Here's a real simple example. Real simple example. In the corrupt Commonwealth of Virginia, there is a maximum liability that a hospital would pay for, killing somebody, cutting off the wrong leg. Literally, it's a little over $1 million. So you go in to have something done to your left leg, and they cut off your right leg, and they go, shoot, we did wrong leg. We still got to cut off the other one. Now you have 2 legs missing. Maximum payout is a little over $1 million. That's because of these immunity or limits to liability. That's what Rich Scheben's talking about. That's what he's talking about. Except it's worse with COVID-19. Rich Scheben, thank you so much for being with us. It's a mess that we're in class.
Well, thank you for allowing me to exercise my First Amendment right.